Hi, friends. Welcome to the God and My Girlfriends podcast. We are so glad you're here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Marcia Ramirez here, and I have my friend Melissa Jackson with me today. Hey, Melissa.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for the weather. It's warming up. I feel spring is in the air. It gives me a little bit of a boost. I'm good.
I know. A lot of people are feeling that, although I feel like we kind of went from winter to summer. It's been like in the 80s all of a sudden. And we went from the 50s to the 80s. And I'm like, wait a minute, where's my nice
Yeah.
70 weather? I want some of that. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of that.
Yeah,
You're getting ready to leave town for a couple of weeks, aren't you?
I am. I am. I'm looking forward to it. And I have two young kids, so there's always, it's always a little bittersweet. You get time to yourself, it feels great, and then you miss them
Mm,
in all their rascally ways.
I know. At least I know with my traveling over the last few years, it has helped to have like FaceTime and stuff. So you can actually see
Yeah.
each other, not just hear them over the phone, but
When I FaceTime with them, they like to play like where they turn my face into like an animal or something.
ah,
Like they're really just playing on the phone, and I'm like trying to get like, "How was your day? I miss you." And they're just like, "Oh, now you're a monkey. Oh, now you're an elephant." And I'm just like, "Okay, okay."
Oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I guess that's how kids, I know when I try to FaceTime with Charlotte, she'll just like I'll go, hi, Charlotte. And she'll go, thanks,
Yeah,
Charlotte. Appreciate that.
yeah,
No, our marriage counselor a few years ago when Mike and I were sort of having a little trouble being apart and a little bump in the marriage there. She said, I want you guys to FaceTime. I want you to have coffee together every morning. Like get your cups of coffee and turn on FaceTime and connect and just look at each other in the eyes. And she said, even though it's technology, at least when you're FaceTiming and you're seeing each other, you can't be tempted to like sort of be half there where you're like also checking your email
yeah,
at
yeah.
the same time that you're talking to your spouse.
Yep.
It's like, no, you have to be present for each other and you can start your day together with a cup of coffee and end it. And I mean, like when I'm in Japan or something, it's the opposite.
Right.
I'm having morning coffee and he's like going to bed, but at least we tried that. So yeah, I mean that does help a lot with all of those with the
Yeah, it'll
stuff.
be
So
good. We'll get through it.
good. Well, today our special guest that we have coming up in just a minute is former Nashville Mayor Megan Barry.
Okay.
And we had a great conversation, Stacy and I. Now, Stacy's not here with you and I today, as many of you know. Her mother passed away, and she's still having good days and bad days, which is to be expected. So that's why she's not in our little chat today because she needed a day off. But she did help me interview Megan, and we had a great conversation with her. And it got me to thinking about just this year, what we're about to all face with the election. I already feel it. Do you feel it
Mm.
already? You can just sense the
I,
like
ugh.
anxiety people are having about, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it feels like it's either anxiety or apathy, and neither one of those feel like they're the best choice.
Oh,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Because in some
Mhm.
ways, it's like, well, we've already done this. Like, it's the same two candidates from
Ugh,
before. It
I
doesn't
know.
feel like, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I'm not hearing a ton of people that are super excited either way. And it
Hmm.
just, so
Hmm.
there's a lot of like almost like a nihilistic apathy too that I'm sensing that
Yeah.
also is not helpful, you know?
No, it's not. It's not helpful at all. And
Do you get anxious about politics? Is that like a thing for you?
it can make me anxious because
Yeah.
yes, it definitely can make me anxious. I've tried to learn how to balance it. For a while there, I realized that I was just watching way too much news. I was kind of consumed. But I have to admit that I did not even register to vote until maybe 10 years ago,
Oh, really?
maybe 15 years ago. But I spent a lot of my life just going, I don't know anything about politics and I don't I didn't wanna be one of those people that just went to the voters booth without being educated and knowing what or who to vote for, and
Yeah.
so when I finally said, "You know what?" As I got into later adult life, I was like, this is important. I need to
Yeah.
figure out, at least during the election cycles, I need to at least try to watch election news, try to be educated to understand what these candidates stand for so that when I do go to the voting booth, I am voting with as best of an education about what my vote means as I can possibly have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would try to turn on the news and try to understand and read articles, and then it just got to be kind of consuming for me, and I could just feel my anxiety, like, raising because you see so many contradictory articles, like, which is the truth? I don't know what to believe here, and especially if you turn on, like, nighttime
Right.
24-hour news, it's not news, it's just opinion pieces, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, like, most news, channels, or especially when you're talking about, like ABC, CBS, and all that,
Mhm,
you know, and then getting further into, like, the network news, like, where, like, Fox News and all that, and MSNBC, like, they're just trying to keep people watching,
mhm,
the
mhm,
goal, because that if they're on all the time, then they have to keep people watching all the time,
mhm,
which means the more and more sort of salacious or pandering to any particular audience, like, it's just going to get more and more. You
mhm,
know what I mean? And so, like, what happens for me, like when I was younger, I would get super, like, opinionated and have all these, like, ideas about the presidential election, and I would, get on my soapbox, and I've been on a Republican soapbox, on a Democrat soapbox, like,
mhm.
but then the older that I've gotten, the more interested I am, I think, in more local news, because it's less of a or local politics, because it's less of, like, an entertainment, like, a ploy for entertainment. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's not vying for my attention the way that um, presidential elections seem to be,
Right.
worse and worse as time goes on, you know?
Right. Well, and the truth is, from what I'm really seeing, it's the president himself, what he can do. I mean,
It's limited, isn't
that
it?
seems like the big thing, but really it's Congress that's making all of the decisions, right? And then even on what I'm seeing, and we can talk about this here in a minute, because I read this article, and local politics is where really a lot of the stuff that you care about is happening. Like, and
Right.
so we need to pay attention just as much, if not more so, to the local politics of what's going around. And we talked to Megan in our interview with her. I really wanted to talk with her, especially about women and how they can get involved and why we should be paying attention,
Hmm.
really paying attention and trying to get to the truth of what the candidates stand for, whether it's president, whether it's a congressman. Megan's running for Congress,
Hmm.
and or even just more on the local councilmen and things like, why is it important for women to get involved, and how can we get involved?
Right.
And it was a great conversation, but I was reading about this thing called election stress disorder. It is a new thing that's recognized by mental health professionals as a common and documented experience characterized by lack of focus, distraction, depressive symptoms, increased anxiety, and exhaustion. And a recent report found that 57% of American adults felt the current political climate was a very or somewhat significant source of stress. So I sense it, like, even just trying to talk to other people about the election, they either like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. Like, they're either like, no, I don't want to even talk about it, or they just suddenly just you bring it up, and all of a sudden it's like you
Attack
just
mode.
open up like this. They're you know, Pandora's
Yeah.
box about
Right.
all their feelings about it.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what I
so
think is interesting in that statistic is that
what?
if you're saying 57% of Americans
Mhm.
are feeling stress, and yet we find ourselves back in one of the more stressful election scenarios that we've had, at least in my voting lifetime.
Mhm.
So I think that the rub here for me, and the part that I find difficult as a citizen, is how do I involve myself in a way that limits the stress, not increases the stress?
Mhm.
Because if more than half of us are stressed out,
Mhm.
why are we right back here electing the same two people?
Yeah.
That blows my mind. And
Mhm.
political opinions aside, right? Like if you're stressed, why are we here? We don't, I
Yeah.
guess what I'm saying is we don't have to be, right? Because technically we're the ones voting people in and out,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
I mean, we can go down all kinds of rabbit holes about the whether or not, our vote counts or if it's efficient and all that. I get that. But I'm just saying, like, most of the time in your life, like if there was a restaurant and you were like, man, 57% of the time that I go to this restaurant, this food is terrible. You either complain and try to get it fixed, or you'd stop going to the restaurant or something. Like something would change, and yet here we are. So
Well,
it's a bit of a conundrum to me.
you know what? I think the problem for me and the stress is that um this restaurant uh there's 2 different restaurants that I have to choose from, and I don't
Right?
like
No,
either
you're right.
I don't like either restaurant, and I have to eat.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
so there's my stress,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
but it's also obviously a lack of control, like, I can't control. And
Mm-mm.
especially like you said, there's some states, our particular state's a very red state. And so I've had, even my kids have said, I was trying to get my youngest to register to vote, which he eventually did, but he was like resisting. I was, why? He's like, you know, I know how our state's going to vote. I know what my one vote isn't going to matter, whether it's an extra red vote or if it's a blue vote, it's not going to matter. And that's a depressing and stressful feeling, is like, I don't like what's going on. And yet there's absolutely nothing I can do to
Yeah,
control.
I do think that that's definitely, and that's why I feel like, nihilism comes into play, right? Because it's like, well, nothing's going to work, nothing matters. And that is, extremely depressing because it
Mm-hmm.
feels like you are a victim of your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime that that's the case, man, that's a recipe for disaster, even in just your own personal struggle, or
Mm-hmm.
even in how you manage sort of your own civic responsibilities. Because if it doesn't matter, then what's the point? And
Right.
I think for me, moving past my 20s and 30s, when you're like, particularly your 20s, when you're like, I have all the opinions and none of the experience, into my 30s where it was like, starting a family, starting to have kids, all of a sudden my other opinions were, I realize now that like the practicality of them, maybe they were a lot more bullhorn and a lot less, you
Mm-hmm.
know, day-to-day life.
Right.
And um, and so then you try to figure that out. And now that I've kind of settled into a bit of my life, I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to the things I can control.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like where can I have the most influence? Well, obviously in my home, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in my walls I have influence, at least
Mm-hmm.
while my kids are young. I realize that will wane over time. But um and then like, where my kids go to school, and the neighborhood that we live in, or the little part of Nashville that we live in, our district, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if part of the problem, I think, is that we start with the big dance and then are less motivated to narrow down, right? But if we
Mm-hmm.
start with the little dance and
Yeah.
work our way up, then it feels less nihilistic, because it's like, well, maybe my vote won't count here, but it does count here. And
Right.
so if it counts here, then I'm good. Then I'm going to keep working at it. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm. And even if our votes don't count, our voices can count. So
Right.
if we're having conversations, you know, that's another thing. I've heard so many people in the last few years say, oh, you know, don't talk religion or politics. Don't talk, you know, it's like that's the two things that you don't want to talk about. But I think that's the problem. If we're not talking about it in respectful and civil ways, I mean, how can we ever understand other people's perspectives, other people's experiences, other people's understanding of what's going on? If we're only allowing these political pundits to tell us what's going on, and we know they have agendas, we know they spin the facts,
Right.
um, it's the experience of other people that I wanna hear about and how certain things are directly affecting them.
Right.
And
Right.
so we have to use our voices in order to share our stories and share our experiences. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I think that's true. And I mean, as I've gotten older and had more experiences, right, then I'm more inclined to
mhm,
think beyond the scope of my own space, you
mhm,
know, and the more people that you let into your life, the more people you have connection with, then you're more interested in how these decisions are affecting not just you, but those people too. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And so, you know, like I remember during the time of Obamacare when it was coming out and it was like going to be good for, you know, I had this great idea of like I love this. I love universal health care. I'm all for it. And even still like I have somewhat more liberal perspectives on that. But the difference though is that I was listening to NPR and they were talking to a small business who was really struggling under the weight of providing this care for other people. And all of a sudden I had a different perspective on like, okay, so, you know, what there's more to this. It's
mhm,
not a blanket solution to all the problems that I'm seeing because
mhm,
there's more problems that I don't see. And
right,
I think like over time I adopted this principle of saying basically figuring out who is the most likely to um to be harmed by this and by whatever the policy is, because policy is just policy. It's not it's like words on paper. It's like something we get to analyze, right? And so it's
mhm,
like who is most likely going to be affected by this policy,
mm,
and if and make a decision based on those most likely to be affected, not
ooh,
based on my ideals. Does that
ooh,
make sense?
it makes so much sense. Yeah, think
And
about
so
who's gonna benefit from this policy and who's it gonna harm,
who's it going to harm?
and then
And what
talk
is
about
that level of harm? Is that level of harm, you know, minimal, right?
right,
Because it, you know, maybe, or is that level of harm, you know, it maybe even it helps me, but
mhm,
who it harms, the harm is so great that I have to consider it.
yes.
You know?
Ooh, I
And I think
love
that's
that.
helped me a lot.
I love that. Yeah, and then maybe even, you know, seek out some people that you think it could harm and talk to them and see how it's harming them and hear their stories and understand
Right.
how that this is playing out in real life. Like one thing it looks like on paper, even just with the abortion issue, you know, on paper, it looks one way, but then you start talking to all these women who have literally almost died because of not having the ability to make medical choices for their bodies,
Right.
and you can understand the other side and how that's harming people.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
And I think that that's just not a perspective you can have until you've div- spread out your like
Mhm.
your space has grown and more people have come in to fill it. Do you
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like you've
Mhm.
allowed yourself to be influenced by more than just your
Mhm.
perspective, which
Mhm.
makes me think like, can you think of a time when you, because I think one of the issues here is over identifying with political perspectives.
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean? Like, so when I'm fully identified with a political party or a political perspective, and I
Mhm.
give my identity over to it, I'm more likely to double down. I'm more likely to not listen to another perspective because my identity is connected to it.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense when you're thinking of this idea of, what is it? Something election stress. What did you call
Election
it?
stress disorder. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because if you think of like, well, it's just an election, who cares, right? Well, clearly a lot of people, and obviously, like, I'm curious if it wouldn't be maybe an over identification with politics, your personal identity so enmeshed that now you're stressed. You know what
Because
I
it
mean?
so matters, because if you identify as a Republican, then you need that identity to be in control. You need to be connected, and you need to know that it's the right, I mean, that you're on
Right.
the right
It's not
side.
just right,
Yeah.
because it's not just,
Yeah.
oh, I made a choice and it turned out not to be great, right?
Mhm. Right.
It's more like I'm not great.
I'm not
I'm
great.
wrong.
Right.
And I know that I'm not, because I'm connected with
Mhm.
my own motivation. I know, like, I think about, like, I'm sure nobody's surprised who's heard me speak before, but I'm more liberal, and I definitely would align more with progressives. But I speak with people in my life who aren't, and they are loving, um,
Mhm. Mhm.
caring, deeply affected, concerned citizens, as I am,
Mhm.
right? And so the idea, if I over identify with my political perspective, then the other becomes fully other.
Yeah.
And I can't, that there's no bridge to build, because if I consider them and their opinions, then that means I'm wrong, or I'm bad, or I'm right. And
Mhm.
I think that sometimes I think, well, because we've had so much access to news and we've allowed ourselves to over identify with political perspectives and opinions and political ideologies, has that affected our ability to not be
Mhm.
stressed? It's just an election.
Yeah.
Like, it matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
but do you see what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions about that.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I have some people that I love dearly that have completely opposite political opinions about things than I do. And um but they're just because what they think is best for our country, like the way forward, we both want a successful, wonderful America. We
Right.
just have different ideas of how to get there, you know?
Mhm.
But a friend of mine recently said, when I was growing up and we would have dinner parties at our house, after dinner, all the men would go on the back porch and they'd start smoking cigars and they would talk politics. And they wouldn't agree on everything, but that was just like what they did. And they talked, it was civil, they were friends, but that's how they like came to figure out ways forward, is by considering each other's opinions and not looking at each other as enemies and as
Right.
something to fight against. But how can we work together on this? And so somebody else the other day said, we need to learn to be curious, not furious. And I
Oh, that's
like
good.
and I loved that. Like, let's be curious about if somebody says something that's completely the opposite of what you believe, instead of like getting pissed off about it and attacking them, why don't we lean in and go, tell me more. You're great about that. I love that about you. I think about you
Right.
in my head all the time. Like, okay, talk about that a little bit more. Tell me more. Like,
Yeah.
why do you feel that way? I want to hear it. I want to hear more of how you came to that opinion. And, and we might actually learn something from each other, or at least learn how to build some bridges.
Yeah, it's interesting that as you're telling that story about, the men going out and talking about, politics and arguing and having essentially really good conversation.
Yeah.
What I think, like, a component to that is trust.
Hmm.
And I think we've allowed the media or the narrative around politics to deplete our trust in each other.
Yeah.
And that to me is kind of the saddest thing. Like, to me, there's two things I'm worried about. You know, I don't lose sleep over a lot of stuff just because I'm tired and I have kids and I want to sleep. But just in general, if there's two things that I lose sleep about, the first is, and we don't have to go into it, but it's Christian nationalism. It's
Mhm,
terrifying to me.
mhm,
That's
yeah,
one thing. But the second thing is the de-civilization, or the de I don't what I'm not trying to think of what the right word would be, but like we've lost our ability to be civil and open
mhm,
and trust that the other person is not an enemy. I don't know what we call that, but we're
yeah,
losing it.
we
And I
are.
don't think that is the thing you can bounce back from. I can bounce back from a policy because I can just work with somebody to change it. I
Mhm,
can bounce back from a president because guess what? They're only in there for 4 years.
mhm,
I can bounce back from a lot of things, but um but completely disconnecting from the ability to be civil and hear other people's perspectives. I don't know how you bounce back from that because um there's no avenue now to a
yeah,
different way of being or a different way of thinking. I mean, the only for me, and obviously everybody can be different, but the primary avenue for me to see differently or think differently it's not here. I
mhm,
can't think about things I don't know about. I
mhm,
can't think my way into a connection.
right,
I have to be open to other people's experiences.
yeah,
That's the only way.
yeah,
And when they're when we demonize the other and we make them into a monolith, or we decide their motivations based on their decisions, we are limiting access to their influence,
yeah,
and that's the part
absolutely,
that really truly does scare me. No president scares me to the degree that does.
yeah, 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 how our culture is being affected by all this, and
Right.
how do we get past that? That is a scary thing, but
Yeah.
maybe conversations like this will help us just get us all thinking about how can we stop this. And I really do feel like women can take the reins on a lot of this and try to help lead the charge for change in this country. And if it's just having conversations with each other and then taking them home, like you said, and starting in our homes and teaching our children to be, more open to talking about and being friends with people that are different from us and learning from their experiences and all that. I
Right.
think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I
So,
think maybe at one point that may have just been somewhat natural because you get involved in more of a small town life, but now I feel like, and maybe it's just my limited perspective of being part of a generation, but that's going to take a lot more intentionality than
mhm.
maybe it once did.
Yeah,
Like you're
I
going to have
agree.
to do some things on purpose.
Yep.
And turning off the news is a good place to start.
Yeah.
Having a good conversation is a good place to start.
Mhm.
And yeah,
Mhm.
being curious. I love that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna make a t-shirt that says curious, not
Not
furious.
furious. I know.
Yeah.
I loved that too. I
You'll have
think
to
that
tell
was
me who did it so I can give them the right
it
credit.
was someone in a book club the other night. Yeah, that said that. I'll have to find out her name, but I thought that was great too. It stuck with me. So,
Yeah.
yeah, be curious, not furious. All
Well,
right. Well,
yeah.
thanks for joining me today. Thanks for this
Yeah.
conversation.
I'm so glad I got to.
Yeah, and y'all stick around because our conversation with Megan is great. We only have 2 more episodes this season. We're gonna take a little break this summer. So, we have Megan today, and then next week we have, Liz Petters, who, has the Deconstructing Mamas Instagram and ministry, and her dad is Pete Enns, which a lot of us know, a great author and speaker, and she's just delightful. We had a great conversation with her, so y'all don't want to miss these next 2 episodes. They're fun. And y'all stay tuned here for our conversation with former mayor and current congressman candidate, congressperson. How do you say that? Current
Yeah.
congressional candidate.
There you go. You got it.
There we go. Megan Berry. Thanks, you guys. See you in a minute. Welcome, Megan. Thank you so much for
Hey,
joining us here today.
thanks for having me, y'all. I really appreciate it. Thanks for making time.
I had several people that knew you were coming on and they were like, "Oh, I can't wait to hear Megan." So a lot of people are really excited about this conversation like we are too.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. I am too. And there's no better way to start a morning than with coffee.
Coffee, we're all having
Appreciate
coffee.
it. Exactly. One of the best gifts I have ever been given by my husband is this amazing mug that actually keeps the coffee warm.
That's what I have. It's an
You
ember.
have, yeah,
Oh
I
my
have
gosh, I feel so left out. Okay.
Yeah,
Stacy.
it is the best thing. In fact, like he gave me this for my birthday because he brings me coffee every morning and which is also so sweet, but now it's
Oh,
really extra sweet because he brings it and it stays warm. And it also means I stay in bed a little bit longer than I should, but because my coffee's great. So
Yeah.
they're
So,
the
Marcia, you need to
best.
put that in show notes because
I
I think
will.
I need to click on that
Okay,
one.
I will do. I'm going to put a link to an ember mug. There's a lot of others, but the embers are the best. And
embers are the
actually,
best.
actually, Megan, I just found I turned somebody else on to that, and then they said, you know what? He had ordered several of the little chargers,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I was like, oh, a second charger. So I have a charger at my desk, a
Oh
charger
my
out where I
gosh.
have my morning meditation time because it lasts for about an hour and a half, 2 hours or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
It's
drinking coffee all morning, so I need.
I know. You know what? I don't have a second charger, so that's actually a brilliant idea. Thank
It's
you.
best $35 I've ever spent. So go get you one.
Well, it is the best present. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, if you're looking for a cool present to give somebody that you
Of our
love, who loves coffee,
I'm with you, girl. I'm with
right?
you.
That was not a paid advertisement, but anyway.
Maybe we
So,
can get an Ember endorsement. I don't know.
right,
Exactly.
exactly.
So tell us just a little bit about I did you grow up in Nashville? Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
your background here.
Sure. It's so funny. I get this weird kind of these weird comments from people because I was actually born in California and I spent
Okay.
like 10 minutes there
Yeah.
because my dad was in the Marines.
Oh.
And we were stationed there and
Hmm.
almost immediately we moved to Kansas. And that's where my dad and my mom's are from and that's where I grew up. That's where all my family is and I got 39 first cousins
Oh
and
my.
22 aunts and uncles. And I used to say, it's too bad y'all don't live in Nashville because you'd be a great voting block.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Exactly.
they all still live in Kansas, and that's where I'm from.
Kansas. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Are you a
I know.
Chiefs fan?
Oh, from like the time I was like little, absolutely. Yeah. Big, huge Chiefs fan, but obviously been in Nashville for 30 years. So love me some Titans, gotta
Hmm.
also support the home team. I came to Nashville, it's been 30 years ago. So
Oh yeah.
I'm
Same.
practically a Nashville native. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Been a
I've been
long
here
time.
almost 40 years. I can't believe it, but
So did music bring you here?
it did.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. It didn't bring me here. Don't
It
ask me
did.
to. No,
Are you not a musician? Are you not a secret musician songwriter,
I'm not.
Megan?
I wish desperately that I had some modicum of singing talent. Trust me, it doesn't stop me from singing, but no, no,
Well, there's a lot of great music to go see in Nashville, even if you
yeah,
aren't a musician. So we're
totally,
lucky with that for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, how did your interest in politics develop over time?
So, it's funny because when I was, politics was really kind of on the periphery for me. And I say politics, but it was more about public service. And that's the space that I was interested in. But I did run when I was in fifth grade back in Kansas. And it was so brilliant because I ran for secretary because back then that's all girls could run for. You couldn't run for president or vice president or
Mm-hmm.
and I ran for secretary, and I had this best friend who was also running for secretary. And my mom was the home mom, right, who was there counting the votes for the election. And so that night, we're sitting around the dinner table, and of course, I'm crushed because I lost. And my mom's like, "Yeah, well, let me just tell you, honey, like I know your handwriting, and you didn't vote for yourself. You voted for your friend Anne." And I'm like, "Well, of course I did." And she's my best friend. She's like, "Yeah, well, you lost by one vote, honey."
Oh
Oh,
no.
You didn't believe in
I
yourself.
didn't believe in myself. And that was exactly my mom's message. She's like, until you believe in yourself, nobody else is going to believe in you.
Wow.
And so that was such a great lesson to learn, in fifth grade. And then like most women, I did run for office again when I was in high school. I was at an all girls high school, so we could run for president and vice president. And I ran, and I ran against a woman who actually had a platform and had a positions and stuff. And I completely lost because I thought it was a popularity contest. She put in the work and I had not. She had really cool posters and I did not. And then when I went to college, I ran again when I was part of a sorority. And by this time I had figured out that it actually took work, believing in yourself, and then you could make it possible. And at that point I did win. But I never anticipated outside of academics that I would ever run again. That was not, politics wasn't on the horizon for me, but I got involved as I got older in my child's PTO, parent teacher organization. I got involved in my local, neighborhood association, and I could really see that being involved made a real difference at a hyper local level. You could actually get stuff done. And that was really like exciting. And so that's when I decided to run for at large for the Metro Council, which in Nashville, has 5 at-large seats. So you run for the whole county. And I won my first race, and then I ran and won again on my second race. And then I ran and won again for the mayor of Nashville. So that was kind of my trajectory, but it was never planned. And sadly, most women don't think about running because the research shows that we actually think you have to be qualified. And men are like, I got this. Sure, I can totally do this. No problem. So encouraging more women to just step out there, I think, is really good. We want women to represent us. There's a famous quote out there that says that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Mm.
Ooh.
Wow, that's good.
Wow.
As we get into this conversation, I just want to mention too this idea of dualism in our society, and the stark idea of what is right and what is wrong, and
Sure.
very little, it seems from the outside, just very little collaboration across party lines. It's a very divisive time that we live in. And on this podcast we talk a lot about relationships that we want to maintain. And how do you approach that? How do you approach these ideas of collaboration, navigating difficult topics, and maintaining relationships with people who might disagree with you on them?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'll use a couple of different examples. So one of the things that I think worked really well at the local level was that we weren't party affiliated. And so it was all, everybody knew what everybody was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a secret, but you didn't run as a particular party. And so that seemed to allow for a lot more cross collaboration. I mean, when I was in office, I worked really well with the governor of Tennessee at the time, who was not in the same party I was, but we got lots of things done. And I think that if we can just, I mean, we're never going to get rid of the parties. I get it. But if we could just rely less on having to just always be so much in their talking points and say, okay, what's actually the stuff that needs to happen and affect lives and get things done. I think that would be great. Now I have like one of my best girlfriends from growing up in Kansas, we still keep in touch, gosh, what, 50 years, and every morning, and she doesn't, we don't share the same political views
Ideology.
on many things. But what we do have is this incredible, long, deep, and wonderful friendship. And one of the things that we do in this to start our mornings is she always sends me a Bible verse, right? So this is like that connection and so we start our day in faith, even though our days may look very different about how we actually actualize our faith, but we both come from a place of faith. And I think if we could all just be more in touch with how much we have in common, and how much we are centered in community and compassion, boy, all that other stuff would fall away. That's just my hope.
I love that. Stacy she used to run a little women's retreat and ministry that was called Common Ground, and it
Oh,
brought women together of all different faiths. And yeah, you just find, instead of like focusing on what you don't agree on, and also trusting that just because we don't agree on the path forward doesn't mean that we don't both have the best interest for our country or our state or whatever. It's not that we're enemies. It's that, wow, okay, we have different ideas of what we think would push us forward. But it seems like now, especially with the news and everything else, they just want to, portray anyone that doesn't agree with you politically as they're the enemy.
right,
Mhm.
right.
And yeah, so, but I mean, as a politician, I mean, that's your job, is to try to reach across party lines, right? And try to get things done.
That's what I believe. I mean, I don't think there's any value in getting elected if you can't use that position to make people's lives better. And that means enacting policies and programs that are going to actually fulfill the opportunity for folks to be housed, to have health care, to have excellent education. I mean, those things that are basic needs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, not to get too spiritual on you, but when Jesus talks to the multitude, he feeds them and he heals them, and
Mm-hmm.
then he talks
Mm-hmm.
and moves on to, talking about spirituality. But it's like basic needs first would be a really great start for us as politicians.
I love that. I love that. Well, it's been like, has it been 6 or 7 years since you left the mayor's office?
Six, yeah,
Six.
6 and a
So
bit.
what's been keeping you busy in those 6 years? What you been doing?
Yeah, so I mean, this is probably not an unfamiliar story to folks who will listen to your podcast, because this affects families across the United States. But back in 2017, my husband and I lost our only child to a drug overdose, and that really, I think that there's so many folks that think that the day your child dies is the day that the problems started. But with substance use disorder, our child had substance use disorder before he died. So
Mm-hmm.
this, we were struggling as a family, but like so many families, we didn't want to talk about it because we were embarrassed and we were ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moment where I took Max, our son, to an emergency room because I didn't know what was happening. And our son wouldn't sign the papers because he was over 21, over 18. And so the doctor just came out and said, like, look, I can't tell you anything because he won't let me. And I know for a fact that my son was ashamed. So if he had not, I mean, shame was the most dangerous thing that day in that hospital room. If the doctor had said to him, look, you have cancer, my child would have been like, get my mom in here and let's find the resources and figure this out, and let's find the best way to get treatment. But that's not how we treat substance use disorder. We treat it as a moral failing. And so, Max died, and he upended our world in
Oh.
ways that happened before he died, but also with his death. And when you have a child that's struggling and ill, I'm not making excuses, but you're not all there. You don't think, you're not making the best choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've tried to do for the last 6 years, back to your question, is to go out. I will show up anywhere, anytime, to any group. I don't charge anything, and I will talk about our experience so that I can make somebody, hopefully in that audience, not feel alone, to know that they are that they are seen, and that there is no shame, that the shame comes in hiding this, and that there is help available. And you want the folks in the audience to hear that message, so maybe they can help their family member or themselves know that it's a disease that they can get treatment for.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So
So,
yeah.
what resources do you often suggest for people who may have a loved one that's facing?
So there are lots of national resources out there for individuals, and maybe what I'll do is, I don't know if you guys have links in your
Mm.
podcast, but how about if I just send a couple of
Yeah.
them to you, and
Yeah.
they, Sam said, I mean, there's a whole bunch out there that folks can access,
Mhm.
that can help. And obviously mental health is oftentimes a co-component of this. So,
Mhm.
making sure that we're expanding opportunity for healthcare with mental health included is always key. So I'll send you those resources, but there are a couple things that I always tell people they should do. And if you don't mind, I'd love to say it real quick. It's
Yes.
like, okay, so the night my son died, he had prescription drugs in his system, but I know he didn't have a prescription for any of those, but
Mm.
somebody did. So if you have prescription drugs in your home, please make sure that you count them and you know how many you have, and then lock them up if you're still using them. It's not that other, like, maybe it's just somebody who comes into your house. The night that Max died, he and his friends were house sitting. So they got into somebody's medication.
Mm.
Um, and that's not uncommon. And so lock up your drugs. If you're not using them, get rid of them. Don't flush them down the toilet, but you can drop them off oftentimes at a local police precinct. There's take back drug days where Walgreens and CVS and the big pharmacies will take back your drugs. And what happens is, and we're all guilty of it, is you get a prescription, you don't use all of it, and then you stick it in your medicine cabinet because you think, oh, I don't want to, maybe I'll need it someday.
Mhm.
The thing is, just get rid of it. The other thing that now in Tennessee and in most states you can do is you can carry Narcan, which I carry with me all the time. And it's just a little thing. I keep it in my purse. And what it does is it allows you, if somebody is overdosing, to give them the shot of Narcan, and it buys you time to get 911. If you have,
Mm.
what you see is with kids, especially teenagers, 70% of the kids who overdose, there's a bystander with them. So that means there's somebody else in the room, and Narcan just looks like this.
Okay. And
It's real
anyone
little.
can get one?
Anyone can get one. So I
Just
carry it in my purse.
do you get it from the doctor or do you?
No, it doesn't take a prescription. You can just get it at Kroger. You can get, I mean, you have to get it from the pharmacy, but it doesn't require a prescription, at least not in Tennessee anymore.
Good to
Uh,
know.
yeah. And then the last thing is you make sure you elect people who care about this stuff.
Mm.
Um, and so, use your voice.
Mhm.
And so those are the three things that you can do today. Count your drugs, get some Narcan, and reach out to your elected officials.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that because I do
Thank you.
know I have a lot of friends whose children have struggled with it's not uncommon uh sadly with either mental illness or substance abuse, and like you said, a lot of times those do go hand in hand. And that's part of what we're doing with podcasts in our community. We want community is a healing place when we talk about it, like you said, and you realize you're not alone and you have people to walk through it. When you try to keep it hidden and you're trying to do it all by yourself and you don't have the resources, it's just not a healthy way. So thank you for the work you're doing. I know it's going to save lives. So,
I hope so. And can I just say, one of the things that Bruce, my husband, said at Max's funeral that still sticks with me that you just said is, he said, the counterweight to grief is community. The
mm,
counterweight to fighting this disease is community. And it
mm,
is that beautiful intertwined concept of we are all in this together, and together we can fix it.
Mm.
perfect. Well, so what made you decide to re-enter politics after taking a little break?
Sure. So, one of the things that makes democracy work is you actually have to have candidates to vote for. And so, at this point in my life, I think there are lots of folks who are afraid of stepping into the arena. Politics has become so ugly. It's become
Yeah.
so nasty. And people don't want to put themselves and their family in situations where people are going to be, let's be honest, mean to them.
Mhm.
Uh, my husband and I are not unfamiliar to mean. We've
Yeah.
seen all kinds of mean. So
Mhm.
we're not afraid of it. And so it's not gonna hurt us. Like, I think it could hurt other people who are unfamiliar with this. So, I really felt like I wanted to step in to inspire and to help, and also to say, like, this is what democracy is. Like, if we have to field candidates, I might not ultimately be your choice, but I want you to have one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are the issues that you're really passionate about these days that you're running for?
Sure. So, we just talked about the opioid crisis. That continues to be something that is front and center for me.
Mhm.
Protecting children in all kinds of ways is absolutely front and center. So
Mhm.
in Nashville, I know that you have a national audience. In Nashville, we just passed the 1 year of the Covenant shooting.
Mhm.
And so the passion around gun safety continues to be something that I believe in. I mean, I grew up in a family where we had guns. So I'm not coming for your gun, but what I want to see are safe storage laws. I want to see red flag laws. I want to see us making sure we're not putting guns in the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
Mhm.
And actually, the polling shows that regardless of which party you're in, people agree on that. Um,
Right.
and so, let's find something that we all agree on and then make it happen. So that's something I really believe in. One of the things with Tennessee is making sure that women continue to have control and access to healthcare, especially as it relates to their own bodies and their own autonomy. We are one of the worst states for maternal health on all levels. And so protecting women who are pregnant and choose to be pregnant, but also women who would like to make a different choice. I mean, I really
Mhm.
believe in that. I want you to have body autonomy.
Yeah. And you mentioned, Megan, how you and your husband had to navigate a really difficult time when you left office.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in hearing a little bit about how you believe you face that as a female leader, as opposed to potentially how male leaders face that. What's your take on that?
Sure. So let me just first of all say that, when I got elected in 2015 to the mayor, there were three things that I loved the most. My son, this amazing job and gift that I had just been given to be the mayor of the city as the first woman, and my husband. And over the course of the next 3 years, I lost two of those things. I lost my son and I lost my job. And there was one thing I could save. And so when we talk about what I've also done over the last 6 years, it's my husband and I have put our lives back together and strengthened our marriage and said, we are in this together and always have been and always will be, even though we got sideways, but that love is the most important thing and it endures, and it does. And I will tell you that I own everything I did. So I don't want to make any excuses for this idea. And are there different standards for men and women? Sure. But it still doesn't make what I did right, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that you own it though. It just seems like
Mhm.
most people just deny or blame shift, and you're just like, this is what happened, and I deeply admire you, the way you handled that. So we
Thanks.
all make
Well,
mistakes. We all do, especially during difficult and sad times in our lives, you know?
yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, I admire the fact that even after going through all that, I guess you just said, like you've had the hate, you've developed the thick skin, and
Yeah.
politics you have to have, obviously. I wonder sometimes like who would want to step
Mhm.
into politics?
Right.
You're going to be raked through the coals, you're going to
Yeah.
be lied about, you're going to be held to different standards, which maybe we should. I don't know, that's another topic, but the fact that you are willing to get back into the arena must speak to the fact that you deeply believe in being a public servant, that you deeply want to change things for the best, because you could easily have just said, okay, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that again.
Well, let's just say that when I was deciding to do this, my husband and I, we're in this together. And so we got in the car and we drove this district. It's 10 and a half hours. So we had 10 and a half hours in the car to talk about all of this. And he was like, this is what you were born to do. Like, you care deeply about people and you
Mm,
want to make a difference in their lives. And so this is the way that you have been called, and you can't you can't not do this. And so, with his support and his love and his sense of humor and his really thick skin,
Mm.
he's like, you got to go, you got to try this. So, I mean, I think that's also been really powerful. I used to have a quote on my desk when I was the mayor that said, power is waking up every day and making a difference in somebody else's life. And
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that if
Mm.
we use our power to enrich and everybody else, gosh, like that's why you're there, not to enrich yourself, but to enrich others.
Mhm.
And so that's why I'm drawn back into the public service of this.
Yeah. So you mentioned your passion around women's health and bodily autonomy. So how do you navigate that when you run into people who say they're and believe they're really one issue voters? How do you have a conversation with them about what it means to support someone who maybe checks all the boxes except for this one?
Sure. I do think that makes life more complicated if you are just a one issue voter,
Mhm.
because people are more complex than that, and so are issues. But I get that folks will oftentimes only vote on one thing.
Mhm.
What we are seeing, again, going back to the polling and the conversations, are that there are many women and the men who love them who want them to be able to make decisions about their bodies and not have somebody else make that decision. And so, will there be voters who don't want women to have that? Absolutely. And would they vote for me? Probably not, because that is something that I feel passionate about. However, I hope that we can be deeper. And so when I talk about maternal health, to me, that's absolutely a component of this, making sure that women have the resources that they need. Now, in Tennessee, we didn't take the Medicare expansion that has left $22 billion on the table for access to healthcare for women and men in Tennessee, and wanting to be able to expand those resources so that when women do choose to be pregnant and to do this, that they have the resources that they need. So our maternal health numbers can go up, and we are valuing their pregnancy all the way along.
Mhm. I love that.
That's good.
It's I think what you just said, I honestly 99% of the women I talk to, are in agreement with all of this, that we should have the right to decide. No one's pro-abortion. No one's like, yeah, I'm just gonna, especially that, the big late term thing. Oh, we got to stop late term. Who's having late term abortions that isn't a horrible
Right.
decision for them? And this is not like, oh, I'm 8 months pregnant. Yeah, I don't want this baby. I'm just going to go. I mean, it doesn't happen.
Something
It
has gone horribly wrong in a
horribly wrong.
pregnancy.
And
You are, yeah.
if you listen to stories and stuff, and even my own self, I had years ago, I was pregnant and I started bleeding, and I went to the doctor and he said, yes, you're probably having a miscarriage, and just go home. There's
Sorry.
nothing we can do about it. And I said, well, should I have like a DNC, which is basically an abortion with the same procedure? And
Okay.
he said, no, I don't believe in doing that. He was a deeply conservative doctor. And he said, the body will just take care of itself. I said, okay. Um, Over the next couple of months, I knew something wasn't right with my body. I kept calling and telling them, and they weren't listening. And I had to go to Louisiana to do a show, a singing background with an artist down there. And during sound check, I just started gushing blood, and they had to rush me to the hospital. And the the fetus or whatever had not come out, and had broken away from inside. This is a graphic, but it had caused a problem, and they had to go in there and do an emergency abortion procedure, basically. And I think about if that were happening right now, like the complications that would be, would the doctors feel like they could do that? It's like there are so many nuances to what they have taken our right away. It's scary. It
It,
is so scary.
it is. And you, I don't, I know so many of these stories, as you said, I mean, these are wanted babies who
Yes.
have had something wrong happen where, the nursery is probably painted, the names are probably picked
Yes.
out, and this is like the most horrible thing. And not to be able to have access to healthcare so that you can safeguard your future, your body, and to medically take care of this, it's unconscionable.
Hmm. Hmm. Well,
So
thank you for making that a priority in your
mhm, it is.
in what you're standing for. I appreciate that. Um, so obviously our podcast is called God and My Girlfriends, and we
Right?
talk about our main thing is like helping women nurture some type of spirituality, whatever that looks like for them, a connection with our creator, nurturing friendships, because we
Yeah,
believe that too many times in society women are pitted against each other and we don't know how to collaborate, we just know how to compare, and so we're trying to break down those walls, and then also trying to get a good relationship with ourselves so that we are happy, healthy, whole
absolutely.
human beings, no matter what. So as you look back in your life, in one of those areas, where do you feel like one of those things has really helped you in all that you've gone through?
All of it, right? So I think that faith sustains us through the worst. And I think that that's always the interesting part, right? When life is going well, I think sometimes you neglect or don't nurture that faith as much as you do when things are really dark.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I have come to appreciate over the last 6 years is out of that darkness becomes light, but that light is even more joyful when it is grounded in a spiritual connection and faith. So not just going back to this and saying, oh gosh, I'm like, things are really bad. This is where I'm going to find my faith. But to be able to say on a daily basis, I'm finding the joy and the love. So for myself, for my community, with my God, so that every day I can wake up and be joyful and excited to
Mm.
do my day. And I think that comes like anything, it comes with practice. I mean, I think that oftentimes we don't practice our faith, and I don't mean that I don't mean that you have to go to church on Sunday, because that's great if that's the kind of spirituality and community that you find. That's great, and I do go to church, but I also see it more like being able to wake up in the morning. And like I said, my girlfriend and I, we share a Bible quote every morning. So that's how we start and ground our faith. But that's a joyful way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because the the certainty that we want to have with faith, those two things conflict. You don't really like you say, it's not faith. Faith is what happens when we don't have answers and when we can't point to something and say, yep, that's it. Like there's no answer, there's no certainty. That's where faith thrives. Absolutely. I love that. And the way that you and your friends share a verse in the morning. What are some other ways that you connect spiritually as you're going through the stressful campaign?
Yeah. Well, just having moments of quiet and meditation, I think is really important to carve out in your day. And for me, that's that's taking the dogs for a walk,
Mm,
because that kind of grounds me. It reminds me that there are other living things that rely on me
mm,
to nurture and love them, and that they are completely dependent on me, right? Like they're not getting a walk if I'm not walking them. And that moment of reminding myself that I'm connected to other living, breathing things, and that I love dearly, is a wonderful meditation. And so I do that. And I also think, girlfriends are the bomb, right? Like, how do you go through life without being surrounded by really amazing women who lift you up? And I have been so lucky in my life, to have those women at different points. And I have a group of women still now that I see on a regular basis. And I think making time to see your girlfriends is also a priority, and we get, you know, kind of pulled in lots of different directions, but, you know, making sure that you stay in touch. I mean, I have a group of girlfriends from high school, and you know, we still get together. And, you know, during COVID, it was a Zoom that we
Oh
would
yeah.
all do, you know, and but, you know, we've got a trip that we're planning, and everybody who's going to try to come late, you know, November this year is going to try to make it. And that that's so, even if we don't, if like people don't end up being able to come, the connectivity that we are putting into it right now, where we're all in the same text chain and we're all talking about stuff, that's connecting.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah. So, as we're wrapping up our time here, we've kept you a long time, but so how can uh, what is there anything else that you'd like to talk about specifically to people in Tennessee maybe that might be about to vote, you know, this year, and anything that we haven't covered that's on your heart that you would like to share?
Sure. So, like any election, this is an opportunity for you to cast a vote for something that you believe in. That's what democracy is. And I know people say, you know, look, my vote doesn't count, or I shouldn't do it. There was just an election 2 weeks ago in California where the two, like it ends up being like the top two go forward. Well, the second and the third ended up with exactly the same amount of votes. So
Wow.
think about that, right? And so and this was like, they were like 37,000, you know, 40 votes each. If there had been one more person that had voted for one of those, you know, it would have been a clear winner. Now they're both going forward because they didn't know what to do, so they put both of them forward. But your vote matters, and it counts. And I know that we get lost in this idea that at the presidential level, really, like, it doesn't matter. And maybe in states that where it's a foregone conclusion on who's probably going to win, maybe it doesn't, but it does matter down the ticket. It does matter at
Hmm.
the state and local levels. You are absolutely able to put your voice out there and make a difference. So please, please, please get registered to vote, and then use your democracy given right to exercise it.
Cool.
Wonderful. And how can people who are listening follow you? What do you have coming up, and how can they connect?
Sure. So I am active on Insta and Facebook and Twitter, all those social media platforms, and I'm happy to share those with you all. You can check me out at Megan C. Berry. I think that's what my Twitter, Instagram, I don't know.
Handle. Yeah.
We'll find
Handle, I don't
we'll
know.
find it and we'll put the
We'll
link in the
find
show
it.
notes. Yeah.
And so, you know, and we are out in the community. I have as I mentioned earlier, I've got 14 counties, significant part of Davidson County, but I'm also in Montgomery County and Williamson County, this district, and a whole bunch of other counties in between. So love to, you know, to see you. If you live in one of those counties, reach out to me, let me know. I'd love to talk with you. And I'm, you know, you can follow along on where I'm going to be also on my webpage.
Well, thank you, Megan. You
Thank
know,
you.
whether anyone completely agrees with your politics or whatever, I think they have to admire the fact that, you know, any woman that's jumping in here and wants to make a difference, I think more women need to be bold, and we need to pay attention to what's going on around us, because things are changing, and women do need to get involved, and we can get involved.
Yeah.
And you are an inspiration in that on that
Aw.
level. So thank you very much. We appreciate you so much. And
Well, thanks, y'all. I really, seriously, thanks for including me. This has been a delight.
well, great
Wonderful.
so much. We'll be following along, and thanks again. Have a great day, Megan. We appreciate
Thanks.
you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, she's inspiring.
Yeah, definitely. I know that it will be a great conversation around the girlfriend table to talk about, you know, just inviting in conversations around politics and learning how to communicate, even if you disagree on issues, just how to find that common ground, I think is a great message. Um, just
Yeah.
being willing to maybe understand or know that friendships can be resilient and should be resilient enough to face
Yes.
those kinds of political disagreements. I think that's really important. because
Mhm.
I don't see that we'll ever get away from this two-party system.
I know.
Mhm.
And I think, I've always heard people say, "Oh, don't discuss religion and politics around the table," or what. Those are too taboo. But I think the problem is when we're not discussing it in healthy ways. We need to have healthy discussions with people. I have family members that don't see eye to eye with
Right.
me, and we are trying to learn how to communicate because we deeply love each other. We do have a lot of common ground, but just avoiding the hard topics, I think, is what is causing maybe a lot of the big divide in this country because we just don't talk about it.
Right.
And we
Right.
certainly don't talk to people about it that disagree with us. We talk about it, but we talk about it in echo chambers, I think is where.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, our next guest that we have coming up is someone who treads in those waters of kind of uncertainty a lot.
Yes, she
So
does.
we have Elizabeth Headers coming on, and she is the daughter of Pete Enns. Some of our listeners may know about him. And
Mhm.
she leads a podcast called the Deconstructing Mamas podcast. And, I really am looking forward to talking to her. That's one of the major topics that I know I hear from those who are going through deconstruction is what do we do about raising kids
Mhm.
in this new way of seeing faith? So I'm
Mhm.
excited to hear more from her, and I think our listeners will be too.
I am too. I actually have a couple of younger friends that have young kids that have expressed that very thing. Like, now, how am I supposed to raise a child with faith when my faith seems to be in flux? And what am I supposed to teach them? And so I think Liz is going to be a great person to talk to, and looking forward to that conversation. And that will actually be our last episode of the year. We're going to not of the year, of this season, and then we're going to take a little summer break that I think you and I deserve, Stacy.
I agree.
But anyway,
Especially you, Marcia. You
yeah.
put in all of the heavy lifting. You just do such an amazing work with editing and
Aw.
all of that. You're just literally a rock star.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Well, I'm trying, and it's been fun though. We do love this. We will definitely be back after our little break because we're having a ball. And so, yeah, that's it for today, you guys. Join us next week for the God My Girlfriends podcast, and we'll see you then. Thanks.